First rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club.
I was going to rip his heart out. I'm the best ever. I'm the most brutal and vicious and most ruthless champion there's ever been.
Conor McGregor is going to blank Khabib when you guys meet each other.
Stomp on his head as he's unconscious.
Get up, you son of a bitch! Mickey loves you.
I promise I'll work so hard.
God, this is a mistake already.
Fast! Last night I cut the light off in my bedroom, hit the switch, was in the bed before the room was dark.
One crazy his way back. One nods as if to say, come on.
But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done.
And that means it's time to move forward. Hi, once again, everybody. I'm Ed Berliner. Welcome into another edition of The Man in the Arena. Lace them up because here we go. We welcome everybody watching us live on YouTube, Facebook, and on Twitter. And don't forget, when the show is over, you can go to our YouTube page, which is at welcometothearena.com, and you can see all the episodes right there. You can also recatch it on Twitter and on the Facebook pages. Don't worry, it's all there. And then all the audio is taken, and we go up on all the major audio podcast platforms so you can download. All we ask, it is simple. Subscribe to the pages, if you will. Like them. Help us along, because that's why we do what we do. Well, we do it for the money, but then again, we don't want to say that out loud because people then think all we are is greedy, just like every other boxing promoter, but fear not. At the end of the show, stick around because we answer the question, what have people been doing in the summer of COVID-19 without sports? Which is something we're going to talk about here today. It is not merely boxing, it is not merely UFC, but there's a whole lot more to discuss today, and that simply comes down to one of the greats. I made sure that we got this in here today because it's a great time to talk about Muhammad Ali, and also, now that there's not a whole lot of sports, people reach back and they grab all these great things to talk about and all these great discussions to have. So we're going to have one about Ali and Mike Tyson today, with our two experts, two great friends, one of whom you know, he is the originator of Randy's Ringside, whom you can see on Facebook every week. You can also hear him on Sirius XM with Jerry Cooney at the fights, Mondays and Fridays, 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time, which we'll talk about. But there's a gentleman joining us here today as a special guest that I have not seen in a very long time, which is why when we brought him up and we hooked everything up for the show today, I said, holy crap, is that him? I've never seriously, I did not think that we were joining, somebody from Banff, Canada today who may have been sitting in a long-term method of keeping away from everybody. I didn't know that he was the mountain man all this time. So along with welcoming Randy G into the Randy's Ringside portion of the Man in the Arena, let us all also welcome, oh man, I can't believe we finally bring this guy back here. It has been a long time. He writes for Boxing Scene, and he is, in my mind, the best boxing writer in America today, without question. Joining us, and there you see him, dead center, the man in the beard, Lyle Fitzsimmons joins us today. Lyle, how you doing?
Ed, I'm doing great. I appreciate the kind words, and the beard is it's an adjustment 5 months in, but we're maybe Duck Dynasty will call and I'll have a gig.
Randy, how do I? Well, by the way, first of all, welcome in, my friend. Good to see you again, Commish. It had to be a little bit of a shock to you as well to see Fitz over there with the beard. I just don't know. All I saw was hair, man.
It's funny, Ed. How are you? And Fitzy, how are you? I speak to Fitz all the time, and I knew that he had a little bit of a growth going on, but man, it looks like Moses.
I love it. It's perfect, brother. But then again, I'm just curious. This is not a hockey playoff beard, is it, by any chance?
Well, I will tell you that it's kind of a hybrid now because I don't know if you can really make out behind me. I'm a huge Edmonton Oilers fan, which is
I'm sorry,
a little despondent after last night. So as I was telling you earlier, when I go back to school, if my Oilers make it past the weekend, this will become a playoff beard. But the way things are going, the playoffs might be over for me before school starts. So we'll kind of see which one goes longer. It's either school or playoffs.
Don't worry about it. The way my Boston Bruins played last night, I mean, I know they're moving forward, but the way the Bruins played last night, it's been that way for 24 hours since they just didn't even show up for the game. So we'll talk about that because I want to. You guys, we all have done and worked in sports our entire lives, so I want I want to get to that before we finish out today. Let me start out with this because, as I mentioned, this is the summer of COVID-19. Randy and I have talked about it. I've talked about it with all of my guests. And we've talked about all different sports. But specifically, let's just focus on boxing right now at the beginning, because there's a couple of articles I've read and some people who opine on boxing who believe that now is the time more than ever, because boxing is a big money sport. It brings in hundreds and millions of dollars. But maybe it's time for the fighters to start taking a pay cut on their purses. That's been mentioned, and maybe time for the promoters to take a pay cut. Yeah, right. Try and find the promoters who are going to take a pay cut. But, Randy, I'm going to come to you first on this one. With that concept, is that a good thing? And, I mean, well, first of all, is it even doable? But would it not help the sport along if boxers and purses got cut a little bit in a time when there is no live audience?
You know, Ed, I think everybody has to just tighten their belt a little bit. Listen, a promoter can only make money and a fighter can only make money if you can put on some fight in an arena filled with fans who are paying money to get in, and then they've got big advertising. Well, the small club promoters can't even do that anymore, and for the big guys to want to put on a big fight, they can't put on the big fights now at places like Wembley Stadium, Madison Square Garden, Barclays Center, any place like that, because fans are not allowed in. So you're not going to get any fans in paying money, and then you got to put the fights on pay-per-view. And if a promoter doesn't have a television contract, he's really unable to put on the fights. I think everybody's got to tighten their belt, and if a fighter really wants to earn $30 million and he can only make $3 or $4 million, so be it.
Oh, terrible. He's only going to make $3 or $4 million. I feel terrible for him. And let's just be honest, because not everybody makes that $3 and $4 million. It's like any sport. The big guns always make the big money, but there's always the little guys, the little gals who are out there who simply aren't making a tremendous amount of money. Fitz, I'm curious to hear from you as well on this, because I fall on the side of yes. Instead of these monstrous paychecks for a time, you got to back off, because otherwise, if you don't do it now, you may not have anything coming up 2-3 years down the road.
Yeah, exactly right. I agree with you that, yes, if I'm a Terrence Crawford or a fighter like that who has a minimum, is used to making a certain amount of money, and if you want to be stubborn and say, listen, if you don't meet my number, I don't fight, that's great. But 2 years from now, you may not have anything coming to you, and half of 10 million is better than none of 10 million. So if I'm him or I'm Teal Lopez or some of these other guys who lately, you've seen headlines about guys saying, well, I'm not fighting unless I get my max. Hey, if it's me, I'm taking what I can get, because down the road, you may not have anything to deal with. And I want to see these fights, and it's good for the sport to see big fights now, because other sports are finding a way to get this done. The UFC is going strong. They're playing baseball. They're playing hockey. They're playing basketball again. And boxing is going to get left behind unless you get something more than what you've been seeing on ESPN all summer. You need big fighters and big fights that people are going to want to watch. And unless these guys, like you guys have said, kind of cinch up the belt a little bit, we're not going to get that. And the entire sport is going to suffer because of it.
See, there you go. And there's that sport suffering. Randy, you and I have talked about this as well with regard to UFC. UFC's out there, and they're fighting, and they're having cards, and Dana White is having a contender series right now where he's got fighters in there constantly. Boxing has already fallen behind the UFC, and I know, Randy, that you're a fan of the UFC. Is it just possible that if boxing doesn't, again, wake up, and I don't know how many times we've said this, because it just gets to be ad nauseum after a while. If this sport doesn't wake up, they're going to shoot themselves in the foot again. There's going to be fewer fans. Yeah, they're going to show up for the big fat fights. But is boxing once again on that edge, that precipice of doing something so incredibly stupid that it will drop this sport back even farther?
I don't think so. And look, you talk about basketball, you talk about baseball, you talk about hockey. They've got these big deal television contracts that we could sit back and watch the games as they play them in empty stadiums. The thing is, with the boxing, we've been watching some of the fights, and I'm one guy, I totally enjoyed ESPN Summer Series because I went into it without any of these high expectations. All I wanted to see was boxing again. And what I feel that we got was about 9 weeks of some very nice cards with some incredible up-and-coming prospects. And I mean, at least about 15 to 20 of them who we're going to be looking at down the road as, I think, big-time stars. But as far as the big fights are concerned, boxing is still trying to figure out how do they put on a big fight in an arena that's empty or a studio that's empty. It's got to be on pay-per-view. You don't see baseball on pay-per-view or basketball or hockey, but it's a different animal, and that's the only way they could make their money if it's a big fight on pay-per-view.
There's a lot of talk about fights that may come down the road, and there's continued to be this discussion about the fact of Manny Pacquiao getting back in the ring. And if we're going to talk about big fights here for a moment, and again, we've heard 1 minute, you've got the rumble out there going, oh, it's close. But then other people come and go, no, it's not. Let's back off just a little bit. The whole idea of Pacquiao getting back in the ring against Crawford and touting this as a big fight, isn't this just basically more junk to throw to people out there? Because if we're going to talk about big fights, I don't see Manny Pacquiao as a big fight, Fitz. I think Manny Pacquiao getting back in the ring is a huge mistake.
Well, I don't disagree with you from his standpoint. I think if in his best interest, he better stay as far away from Crawford as he can get. But the reality of it is that fight fans that are out there are going to recognize Manny Pacquiao more than they will a lot of guys that the three of us would say, I want to see, Teo Lopez fight, or I want to see Shakur Stevenson fight. The mainstream public is going to know a Manny Pacquiao fight because they've seen him do this thing for 20 years now. So it'll still be a big event. It'll still be the lead item on SportsCenter. I don't know that Shakur Stevenson, regardless of who he fights, or Teo Lopez, or whoever you have at lightweight or welterweight, is going to be the lead story on SportsCenter and going to get a spread in Sports Illustrated or whatever. Manny Pacquiao will still do that. Should he still be fighting at 41? Should he get anywhere near a young lion like Terrence Crawford? No, I don't think so. But I still think a guy like him is going to sell better than who would be better fights, and 10 years from now will be better fighters than Manny is now. But I still think Manny is one of the guys who's going to stir the drink. And, if boxing wants a big fight, he's one of the guys they can turn to.
Randy, is it worth stirring the drink with Manny Pacquiao again?
Well, I think it is. And just like Lyle says, he's the one that the fight fans, and not just the hardcore guys like me, basically the people who know a little bit about boxing, who might buy a pay-per-view, whatever. Oh, Manny Pacquiao's out there. Wow, he's been around forever. But listen, this time last year, Manny Pacquiao went in against undefeated, hard-hitting Keith Thurman. And most people were saying, this is a big mistake for Pacquiao. Big mistake. There's no way he's going to survive this fight. Survive it. He basically outclassed Thurman. He knocked him down. He decisioned him. And only months earlier, he retired Adrian Broner when Broner said, I'm going to retire this old man. Manny Pacquiao is a freak of nature. It's going to stop one day. I don't know when that day is going to be. I don't want to see him fight Terrence Crawford, who just might be the best 147-pounder out there. But with Manny Pacquiao, you just never know.
I don't know. I know. No. Randy and I go back and forth all the time on old fighters here, and I'm not a fan. Tyson gets in the ring, and we'll talk about Mike in a little bit as well. I have no desire, man. I'm heading for Netflix or Amazon, and I'm looking for something to binge at that point. Maybe I'll dig up an old boxing movie. Now, let's then take the next step to a little controversy here, I think. And I'm going to sit back, and I'm really going to enjoy this between the two of you guys, because you guys are the experts on this one. And all I am sitting here right now is basically the referee, because we have yeah, see, and I can see Randy knows exactly what's coming on this, because I warned him, and I was ready for this, because Lyle, you wrote a column that talked about the ESPN fights this summer. Now, we've talked about Bob Arum, we've talked about the fights, we've talked about the fact that it would seem at least that Arum is doing it right. Certainly with COVID-19 and creating the bubble in Vegas, it would seem to be a good idea. However, to some people, the fights have not exactly been, what's a good word? Good?
Watchable?
I'll drop it there because here's Lyle Fitzsimmons, and for those listening on the audio podcast, I'll read it for you. And this was written under the title of ESPN's Boxing Return So Far Has Fallen Flat in BoxingScene.com. Though top-ranked cards have returned main event commodities like Emmanuel Navarrete, Jesse Magdaleno, and Shakur Stevenson, among others, since returning early last month, the fights in which they've been matched have been barely watchable, let alone TV-worthy in terms of competition. Stevenson went 6 rounds with a guy whose previous 3 opponents had 32 losses between them. Magdaleno's foe was slightly more competitive and far more amateurish on the way to a 10th-round disqualification for repeated low blows, and Navarrete's foil had already lost 3 straight fights before arriving in Mexico City and left 6 rounds later with a dubious pro record of 13, 14, and 1. None of the fights even measured up to a glorified sparring session label. Ooh, the gloves have been thrown. Lyle, I'm going to give you a first shot at this to expand on that a little bit because in one sense, don't we know that promoters like Arum are always going to put tomato cans in the ring no matter what anyway? We've been used to this over decades.
Yeah, this is not a brand new concept, and I didn't mean to indict Bob Arum like he invented it 2 months ago, especially in the midst of what we're all going through. But I thought that took tomato cans to a new level, and they were, like I said, they were glorified sparring sessions, and even that was a stretch. And later on in the column, I also compared it to the way the UFC is doing things, and the UFC is putting on shows in bubbles and all the rest, but their cards have been watchable. Even their deep undercard fights are still competitive. They match them well, and the main event fights are not just a headline guy against a guy who has no business being in the cage with him. They're competitive fights. The production value of the show makes it at least entertaining to watch alongside whatever is going on in the cage. And the ESPN product, especially early on. Now, I will concede that later on, there were some better fights and better matches. I remember Joshua Greer fought and lost, and that was a compelling fight. And Jason Maloney fought. Some of those were good shows. But I thought the Stevenson thing was just, everybody was so psyched up to see boxing. You got so tired of Korean baseball after 3 months that you wanted to see a fight. And I just thought it would be better than that. And plus the production value of it alongside was like, I did Zoom meetings with kindergarten or with elementary school classes earlier this year that looked more organized than those 4 guys trying to call a fight together. They'd step on top of each other. You go 5 or 10 seconds with nobody saying anything. It didn't look like what I thought ESPN would look like, regardless of the circumstance. I understand we're all going through a situation that nobody has ever seen before, and I give them a break for that. But I still thought it would be better.
All right, Randy, I know that you and I have talked about it, and we were both happy to see boxing back at some form. We gave Arum his chops, but Fitz seems to have got a couple of points there.
He does make a few points, but you got to remember, and you talked about it, Ed. You said the UFC is putting on these great fights, and Fitzy, you said it from top to bottom. They're thick, but hey, the UFC, they're pay-per-view events. 1 million people around the world are popping in, about $75 a pop to watch it. These are ESPN shows where Bob Arum was not getting a ton of money, and he had to take a lot of guys from his stable. I knew what we were going to be getting, but I must tell you that in watching all of the shows, their summer series, I got to see a guy that I think is going to be a future heavyweight champion. I'll go that far. 20-year-old heavyweight Jared Anderson. I got to see Felix Verdejo, a lightweight who has had so much promise but has been injured over the years, finally arrive at, I think, what is going to be stardom for him. Remember that name, Felix Verdejo. I saw Edgar Berlanga come into the fight with a 16-0
Careful, I thought you were going to say Edward Berliner. I was going to say I'm way past my prime, dude, but it was a nice try.
Not Edward Berliner, Edgar Berlanga. And 16 first-round knockouts. He's knocked out everybody in the first round. It's just exciting watching him in action. 168 pounds. We got to see a 140-pounder by the name of Elvis Rodriguez. We all love Elvis. Everything is Elvis. I mean, this guy is going to be terrific. We got to see Olympic champion Robeisy Ramirez, who beat Shakur Stevenson narrowly in the Olympics. Robeisy lost his professional debut. Well, it turns out that Robeisy and his opponent are both signed with Top Rank. Top Rank made the rematch. Robeisy beat him in the rematch. We got to see a guy by the name of Clay Collard, who was an MMA fighter, and while he was off, he doesn't fight for the UFC. He fights for one of the other organizations. They said, if you want to go box, go box. He became a star in a couple of fights on ESPN. We saw Kim Clavel.
Is it worth it?
Winning at Espy.
But
I loved it.
Is it worth it, though? I mean, you're right. There are a lot of good fighters in there to talk about. But here we are talking boxing. And if you look at the boxing news out there, a lot of people are focusing on these dog fights that were in there. Oops, I better not say dog. I've got two dogs, and I don't want to insult them any. These basic trash fights. Is it really worth it to get those boxers out there? Look, I know you got to fill a card, but Bob Arum couldn't do better than these guys and these fights? I mean, the low blow fight was embarrassing.
Keep in mind, there's no fans there. It's not pay-per-view. He can't put on the big fights with no money coming in. They did what they could. They gave us prospects. They gave us some pretty good competitive fights, I thought, over some of them. You'll see it on big cards. You're going to see it on all cards. Some of the undercard stuff with all the promoters is absolutely the worst. I mean, I gasp at what some commissions will actually pass. I love seeing Michaela Mayer. I love seeing Kim Clavel, who actually put her boxing training on hold, and she's a nurse, and she went to work on the front lines for a couple of months. I got to see some incredible personalities and some pretty decent fights. It was what I expected. I did not go in thinking that I was going to see the fight of the year and some big fights. It's what I paid for, and I didn't pay for it. I get ESPN, I turned on the show, and there it is.
Okay, so then let's look at it this way. Fitz, can you then say that while you hammered the fights, and I rightly so, I mean, the fights you talked about were awful. I mean, they were terrible. You had to pay for them. I'd be walking out. I'd be asking for my money and at least a 10 times refund. But can we at least say that it's the best that you can do, and maybe it's okay to put something up that's substandard? Yeah, let's use those lines, because at least it's something. If you're going to do something, feed the beast. Get people interested again, because otherwise they're all going to head for the Contender Series on UFC.
Well, I don't argue that. I mean, I will say, once Randy said his name, Berlanga might be the best thing that came out of all of this, because he is a guy who, I think, if he continues doing this, knocking guys out in 45 seconds, he's like a lightweight Mike Tyson. And eventually that is going to be something that grabs a hold of people, and they're going to want to see this kid. So I think if you look at the 9 weeks, and if you ask me to rank the best things that came out of him, he's by far and away one of the guy that I'm going to remember most about what I saw all summer. It was a lot of it had to do with the production value. I thought they could have done better. I thought they should have had a couple of guys in the building. The UFC has had guys, a broadcast team in the building. I realize they have far more control over their production than Top Rank does with ESPN and all the rest. It was as much the fights and the production together that just turned me off. And the UFC stuff that I was talking about, they weren't all the pay-per-view shows. I mean, they were the shows they put on Wednesdays, the fight nights they put on Saturdays. They still managed to put compelling main events together just about every time. It wasn't just the ones, led by the top end guys that everybody knows. But so like I said, I expected more going in. I guess Randy and I had different expectations going in, so that's why maybe the taste in my mouth is a little different than his.
Very well put.
The thing is, though,
that's the way Randy just wants to see the boxing. I get it.
Yes. As this hardcore guy, I did know that I wasn't going to be going into this with any high expectations. There were no major, it wasn't Velo against Tilo. It wasn't Lomachenko against Teofimo Lopez. No, I wasn't getting that, and I knew it. And I knew I was going to be seeing, there was a guy on it, 118-pound school teacher by the name of Gabriel Muratalla. He's a school teacher. and he went in there. You had to fall in love with Gabriel Muratalla.
Well, then let's just say it out loud then. You knew maybe more than anybody else, and certainly you're the expert. You knew going in that some of these fights were going to suck out loud, yet you were still willing to go ahead and watch it simply because you needed your boxing fix. How's that?
Every show had something that I was waiting for. I knew that the undercards, and there was only about 5 fights on each card, I knew that 1 or 2 of them, and I think I picked every one right. And one of the only ones that I didn't pick right was the Joshua Greer fight, which I think was either the first or the second night of boxing. I really thought that Greer would come away with a decision. It was the other way around. But you know what? In watching that, and the guy who beat him, his last name was Plania, Mike Plania, I would love to see a rematch there more than I even wanted to see the first fight. So I came away from that wanting even more. I enjoyed that Summer Series, and I applaud Top Rank with what they did. I applaud the Nevada State Athletic Commission for putting together that whole medical protocol, working with Top Rank, working with the MGM Grand, the way they did it with the bubble and everything else, set the stage. It showed everybody else how to do it. I applaud all of them.
Okay. Let's then turn to something which I don't think any of us are going to applaud at this point, but we need to discuss in hindsight, but also look at again, boy, here it is. It's another one of those problems with boxing that you just can't get away from. It always seems it's like if you're going to talk about trying to get rid of the dirt and the slime and the grime, this is the kind of stuff that you want to get rid of, but it always seems to pop up again. I want to go back a couple of weeks ago, not even that long, to the fight between Adkins and Estrada, and what turned out to be an historic fight in women's boxing because of how quick the knockout was. But then let's break it down. The promoter is a guy named John Cardin. I wanted to make sure I wrote this down, which is why I'm referring to my notes here. Cardin is a guy, and I knew I heard that name before. Cardin was the guy who 2 years ago in Missouri put together a fight and put a fighter in the ring who was undoubtedly, without question, mentally challenged. Without question. This guy had no idea what he was going to get. He put him in the ring, yet he simply wanted to put a body in there, and he could have got somebody killed. Now he puts together a fight where it turns out that once you look into it, the woman who stepped into the ring, who was the opponent in this one, Adkins, is his estranged wife that he puts in the ring, and she could have gotten killed. I mean, this was a brutal example of a greedy, unbelievably gutter-dwelling promoter who's been there before, and everybody knew his history, guys, and they let him put on a fight. I mean, this is unconscionable because somebody could have been killed in this one. Fitz, I'll give you first shot.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that obviously will turn Randy's stomach, turns mine as well. I mean, as much as we love boxing, stuff like this goes on. And you know, it's not like, you know, you go play baseball or something, you get beat, you get embarrassed, and you walk home and you're good. People can die in there, you know, and you can't, but yet things like this exist. And this is the stuff people will read about and they'll remember, and they'll roll their eyes when they hear about boxing. They'll forget all the great stuff about it and all the great personalities and all the great fights and the compelling nature of it all and all the good things. You know, they'll hear about things like this. They'll hear about Michael Nunn fighting in Iowa a couple of weeks ago, and Randy and I went round and round about that. And it's just a shame that stuff like this continues to pop up every year or two, every 6 months or two.
But
whatever.
That's the question,
There's
though.
Always
this
that
constantly pops up, Fitz, and we knew this guy. All you have to do is Google him, and you can find out everything about him. I think Charles J. wrote a long column about it. Our buddy Charles basically detailed everything in here. So if the promoter, obviously the state knows about what goes on here, then you stop it. You don't let it get out there. Period. End of story. Why are we still talking about this nonsense about state commissions that allow fights like this to go on when they know they've got a clown sitting in the background who maybe could get somebody killed? That's what I'm sorry, but I just don't get it.
No, I agree. You know, outside of a couple of commissions that everybody knows are the cream of the crop, this kind of stuff goes on, and it makes me shake my head. I'm sure it does Randy as well. How to get rid of it? I mean, we've been talking about this for years. People talked about this 20 years ago. They'll talk about it 20 years after we're all gone. I don't know, but it's tragic, and maybe I hope it doesn't result in somebody getting killed, but eventually it will if this kind of stuff keeps going on, and then you'll be sorry,
So then again, I turn to the commish. Randy Gordon, former commissioner of the New York State Athletic Association. You ran an above-board shop. I mean, everybody talked about how brilliantly you ran it and how perfectly you ran it and how the fights were well done, the boxers were well done. Everybody, you basically held the line. So here we are now, Commission. You're the guy. I'm going to give you complete power right now. You have the authority to do anything. And let's keep it within those means of what can be done. What do we then do to kick these killers, these potential murderers, out of boxing and keep them away from the sport?
Well, first of all, the California State Athletic Commission, they're the ones that approved that particular card. Andy Foster, who's the executive officer, is one of the very, very best in the game. If I was like supreme commissioner, Andy would be one of my guys. That's how good he is. Bob Bennett would be one of my guys. Greg Serb, Larry Hazard, all guys who know and love and care, know what to do. Andy Foster says he messed up in the fight because there was so much to do. And remember, with the medical protocols and everything else, that he absolutely overlooked it. He probably went to one of the sources that we all use. It's called BoxRec. And BoxRec.com has the fighters' records. And when you first looked at the record of the opponent who got knocked out, Miranda Adkins, she was 5-0 with 5 knockouts. Wow. That's all you really have to see. So it's 5-0, 5 knockouts against 17-0, about 6 knockouts. So you know what? I'll let the fight get on. The fact is, it's deeper than that. Now, I didn't realize until the fight was starting, I was watching it, and I knew about Sinisa Estrada, the winner of that fight. I knew that she could fight. And she's in the corner bouncing around, getting ready. But when the camera cut to Adkins, she was standing very easy in the corner. She was brushing her hair, making sure her jet black hair was in place. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this lady is in for a fight in a couple of seconds, and she's brushing her hair. And then I went to BoxRec, and I said, you know what, I better not go any further because the fight's starting. I don't know, I might miss something, and I'm glad I kept watching. As soon as it started, it was over. Then I continued to look, and I said, oh my God, the 5 fights that Adkins had, yeah, she won them all, but all the opponents had never won a fight. One of them went on to fight 2 more times.
We're rookies in tomato cans.
She was knocked out in both of those fights, first round. They were all knocked out in the first round. I think one went into the second or third. But it shows you that she was fighting cocktail waitresses who were in it for $300-400. Now, Andy Foster said, put the blame on him. But I'm not going to put the blame just on Andy Foster. I'm going to put the blame on Golden Boy. They're the one that made the match. They put it together. They put it together. They knew what they were giving the California State Athletic Commission. And if, you know what, I must tell you, I would have been checking it out. And if any promoter gave it to me, they would be thinking, man, I hope we could put this one past Randy Gordon. And when it came to me, I would have said, there's no way she's getting in the ring. You either kill the fight or you get an opponent to replace her at the last second.
Well, but see, there's those checks and balances because you're talking about, and I think it's fair, you're talking about BoxRec being involved, which everybody goes to for records. Yeah. But there needs to be more than that. You can't just sit there and look at a website. You've got to do more than that. So if Foster wants to take the blame, I'm going to give him a part of the blame. I'm going to give him a good part of it as well, because he and his staff should have checked it out. Going to BoxRec, that seems to me to be lazy. So does that then not point out that in boxing, we've got to have a better system, which is nationwide, where people can start to look at records and know that they're real and be able to examine the depth of the record without having just look, 1-0, a 6-0 fighter, that's good. But you've got to dig deeper into it or you're going to get somebody killed.
And the commissions do dig deep. I think back now to when I became commissioner in 1988. I didn't have the internet. There was no such thing as the internet. And I used to find out about opponents. If a guy was coming from Florida, if he lived down in Florida, I would call all my Florida connections. Have you ever seen this guy? All the writers down there. I'd call Charles J. In every single state, I had people down there where I could call. I could call the gym owners. And I did, and I found out a lot, and I used to kill fights all the time. Look what happened a couple of weeks ago, July 18th, I believe it was, in Iowa. Because of ugly politics, they not only put on a card, one guy was 1-18, he'd been knocked out 12 times. Another guy was 1-12, he'd been knocked out every time in the first round. They let these guys get on. Then they let 3,000 people into the arena, close proximity to each other, nobody with masks on, and now I'm getting reports. Guess what? There's coronavirus there. It's all politics. It's the ugliness of politics.
Is it politics or is it greed? Is it because that's the easiest thing for people to ask? Are they just getting paid off under the table?
No, absolutely not. It's so easy to say somebody's getting paid off, bad decision, the judge was paid off. In all my years in boxing, I never, especially with the commission, I was on top of everything. I knew what every judge was doing, who they were calling, who they were seeing, who they were having dinner with. But that was me. And I know there are others like that, like Larry Hazard, my next door neighbor in Jersey, if you will. There are guys out there who do care and pour their heart into it. I know that Andy Foster does care, but he says, this one was a fastball that got by me.
Okay.
That's what it was.
Okay, well, then fair. We'll go ahead and say that. Thank you for admitting that. At least you had that guts to come out and say it. Yeah. I think, though, where we need to go on this one to close out this part of the discussion, Fitz, is that we need to then hold the feet to the fire of the promoters and everybody involved, and the state commissions as well, because I think Randy makes a great point. BoxRec is just an internet. It's an internet site. They do well. I'm not going to hammer them. I'm not going to make fun of them. I'm not going to say they get it wrong. But look, you have to be more in-depth. And what Randy talked about was in the old days, before the internet, where you pick up a phone and call. Do that. There needs to be more communication. That's why it just seems to me it's become lazy. Let's go ahead. Let's go to BoxRec and check it out and walk away. No, you got to do your due diligence. That's what you're getting paid for, damn it. That's the biggest thing that people want. And me as a fan, if I know offhand that I've got a state commission that's letting fights like this go by the board, hell, I'm not giving you my money because I know I'm going to get had sooner or later down the line. So everybody's got to be a little bit more, they got to be tighter in what they do. And we have to hold their feet to the fire and hold them accountable at all times. That's the big thing in boxing.
Yeah, agreed. And like I said earlier, there are a handful of commissions, in California is usually one of the premier ones. So this is kind of an anomaly for them that they let that go. With guys like Randy in charge, that will pick up the phone and that will do the extra research, and they won't rely on a website. And if they have questions, they'll ask them instead of just letting things slide by. There needs to be more people like that. There needs to be some uniform apparatus that oversees them all. Now, whether that'll ever happen, I mean, this is a drum that's been being beaten for generations, and it still hasn't happened yet. But if there was one person that had a framework that he or she ran, then maybe these things would change. But right now, there are too many outlaws able to run their own little shows in Iowa and places like that, where stuff like this gets by, and it doesn't happen in California. And thank goodness it didn't result in something a lot worse than it did.
There's that word,
outlaws. This stuff's dangerous out here.
Yeah,
that's the word, outlaws. It's still Wild West. Still is. It has been for years, decades.
I just want to add one more thing. Andy Foster also, again, getting back to the executive officer in California, with everything he was doing with the coronavirus, when this was put in front of him, 17-0 against 5-0, he also saw that it was being sanctioned by the WBC as a world title fight.
Then let's hold them accountable as well. They're just as much to blame then.
How they could have stepped in and said, okay, we're going to sanction this as a world title fight. Shame on them, too, for being suckered. There were a lot of fastballs thrown that day for that whole show, and a lot of people were swinging and missing, and it got by everybody. And I really hold Golden Boy. They are the one that took the fighter. They're the one that made the match. I put them chiefly to blame. They're the ones who did it. And this creepazoid ex-husband of Adkins, shame on him. And I must tell you, he puts on shows in other states. If that doesn't draw a red flag, and I don't care, in Kansas, they don't have the strongest commission or whatever, they all better be watching who's making the fight.
The guy's name is John Cardin, Carden. And if you are a boxing fan of any ilk whatsoever, and you go to a card promoted by this sleaze bag, you're okay, go ahead. Pay your money. Do what you want. But here's a guy who put a mentally challenged individual into the ring once and then put an ill-prepared ex-wife into the ring twice, and we've seen what happens. So you want to go spend your money, do it. But by the way, you brought up Mauricio Sulaiman, and it's interesting because the WBC gave their okay to that fight. And, Randy, I think that's fair to say that they need to have their feet held to the fire on this one as well. It's interesting how Sulaiman comes out, and while he's not promoting the fight, he's getting involved in the potential of a Tyson Jones fight with a couple of comments, which I kind of found interesting for him to make, where just talking about it, he says, the exhibition is scheduled for Saturday, September 12 in L.A., California, an 8-round contest without headgear and wearing 12-ounce gloves. This is a point that worries me. Both Tyson and Jones should wear headgear that boxers use in sparring. They should also wear 16 or even 18-ounce gloves. So why is Mauricio Sulaiman getting involved in this one, Fitz?
Hey, it's good PR. It makes people like us talk about it. What business it is of his, who knows? But yeah, he can come off looking like, hey, we're the champions.
I told you so.
And all the rest. And yeah, let's forget about this thing in California we just kind of screwed up on, world title fights and all that. Didn't you see what we said about Roy Jones and Mike Tyson? See, this matters to us. And, it's ridiculous. But, the show will go on because people will pay to see it.
Of course.
If Mauricio thinks he got away with something, then and he looks better because of it, then hey, good.
What do you think, Randy? Why is Mauricio getting involved here? Is he just because he is Mauricio Sulaiman, he's basically just putting in his 2 cents?
Well, I know Mauricio very well, and I must tell you that I find him to be absolutely caring about boxing. How he ever sanctioned the female fight to be a title fight. Listen, they got vacant titles all over. The undefeated records were thrown at him, and I'm sure that was one of the fastballs that got by him, just the way it got by Andy Foster. He said, sure, let it be for the some interim title or whatever. But he does care, and I've spoken to him about Tyson and about Roy Jones Jr. And when I first spoke to him, when we first heard about this, he said, Randy, and this is one-on-one. He said, Randy, I'm very concerned about this, that it's going to turn into a real fight, and somebody could get hurt. We don't want to see that. And I know he really does feel that. He's, some of the
don't let him in the ring. Don't let him get in there in the first place.
But if it is an exhibition, it really is. It's tough almost to stop it. I don't know. There's not going to be any judges. There's not going to be any decision. They say there is going to be a referee. I heard they're not even going to allow a knockout. How do you prevent Tyson throwing a hard shot, landing it on the chin of Roy Jones, who has been knocked out cold before? Dennis Lebedev knocked him into another planet, into another world, into another dimension. Mike Tyson, if he does the same thing to poor old Roy Jones, I don't want to think about it.
No, I don't either. But then again, to me, it's an exhibition. So to me, it's worth about $5 and a box of popcorn. And that's it for me, which is the top end.
Ed, that there's going to be 1 million people and more.
$4 and a box of popcorn.
You know that.
$3.50 in a box of popcorn. I mean, that's it. It's an exhibition. You're right. It's a couple of guys pawing at each other, and one may actually get in a shot. But you're right. I'm Randy. We've been here before. People are going to pay $50, $60, whatever it is, to see it. I get it. Let's talk about a real great fighter for a moment here, because one of the things that is sort of permeating America at this point and at this time in our societal history is sports and politics. And there's tremendous discussion about it. People hate it. People love it. People want the athletes to get involved. Some of them want them just to sit back and just play the game. We've heard this over and over again. If you think about it, and I will wager that a lot of people haven't. Boxing truly is at the forefront of this, because when it comes to an athlete who took time to be political in many ways and was sort of at the forefront of all this, you have, of course, the 68 Olympic Games with Smith and Carlos, which destroyed their lives completely. But Muhammad Ali was quietly political for his time and started so many political discussions. One can only imagine what a guy like this would do in an age like this.
We lost Muhammad Ali on Friday, a man whose impact went far beyond his sport. Ali was a boxer, and as he let the world know, so much more.
Right. That's why I say I'm the greatest. I'm a poet, I'm a movie star, I'm an actor, I'm a fighter, and most of all, I'm pretty.
A three-time heavyweight champion of the world, Ali was known for his unorthodox style, rolling along the ropes to avoid a flurry of blows.
I'm gonna float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. His hands can't hit what his eyes can't see.
But for a man who made his living dancing around the ring, he became a legend when he took a stand. In 1964, he announced he was giving up what he called his slave name of Cassius Clay and converting to Islam.
Cassius Clay is a name no more, is that right?
Yes, sir. It's Muhammad Ali. Muhammad means worthy of all praises, and Ali means most high.
Ali was a militant voice in a debate over what it meant to be black and live in America. He asserted his greatness when in some parts of the country, a black man who did that could be killed for it. By 1967, Ali became a pariah, refusing to join the army on religious grounds during the Vietnam War. At the height of his talent, he sacrificed his fame, title, and liberty for his beliefs, marking a new era in political activism by a star athlete. His comeback bouts with George Foreman and Joe Frazier in the 1970s made him a global celebrity. And in 1981, he even put his fame to use.
The former heavyweight champion went to a window and reportedly yelled, "I'm your brother. I want to help you,"
by talking a suicidal man back from the brink. For the last half of his life, Ali battled Parkinson's disease, rallying in 1996 to carry the Olympic torch. Once scorned, he was now a hero. Ali hadn't changed. The times had. Writing in his autobiography, Ali said he wanted to be remembered, quote, as a man who stood up for his beliefs no matter what, as a man who tried to unite all humankind through faith and love. I wouldn't even mind, he wrote, if folks forgot how pretty I was. Muhammad Ali was 74.
That, of course, was in 2016 when Muhammad Ali left. Randy, in this discussion and discourse we have in America today, is it not fair to say that athletes have a special place and a special platform where they can speak, where male or female, no matter what sport they're in, they have an idolatry, that people fawn upon them sometimes. Sometimes it's earned, sometimes it's not. But if you look back in history, Ali proved that it's not a bad thing, that you can bring it forward and you can make a change, because he actually paved the way for Carlos and Smith in 1968 by what he did in 1964. And it's time for people to stop saying, just go play, because they're athletes, they're men, they're women, and they have the right to say things, and they can change lives. Because, man, Muhammad Ali changed an awful lot of lives.
He really did. But it's unfortunate that so many athletes, white, black, and every other color, want to be Muhammad Ali. There was only one Ali. He could do stuff outside of the ring that just nobody could do, could get away with. He did it with humor. He did it with facts. And he just made us think about ourselves and how we treated people. And I will tell you, it's one of my greatest joys. I wrote this children's book. Every one of my 12 grandkids have grown up on reading Muhammad Ali by their grandpa. One of my daughters, her name is Allie. Why? I didn't want to have her call Randy. I wasn't the greatest. He was. and my daughter realized that.
I'm sure to this day she's very glad.
Yeah,
appreciates that.
And even growing up, when she was watching Ali fights and everybody's going, Ali, Ali, she'd be jumping up and down in the bed saying, everybody's cheering for me. Everybody knew him. He was probably the most recognizable face on this planet when he was around, more than any other world leader. There's nobody that you can say was more famous than Muhammad Ali. And when he spoke, people listened. And over the years, he changed. He went from being a real radical and everything else to being a guy who embraced humanity. And that's what made him so incredibly special.
I think something else that made him special is that, and if you think about it, Fitz, he really didn't take a platform. He didn't call press conferences, even though at that time it was a lot different. He did it quietly. I remember one interview that he was in, I think it was Meet the Press or one of the network shows, where they continued to ask him about his political affiliation. He said, I don't know nothing about politics. All I know is Gerald Ford was a nice man, and he invited me to the White House. And it was he was self-effacing. He admitted that he didn't know, but it was his actions that did things. And I can only imagine that even in this time of the internet with so much social media, I don't think Ali would be a guy hitting social media. I think he would still be the quiet, unassuming, at times, let's not kid ourselves. He wasn't unassuming when he didn't want to be, but who just went about his business and proved that athletes can create change in America simply by actions instead of words, which maybe is a not bad thing for everybody to learn entirely in this society.
Sure, he transcended all that stuff. He was an athlete who spoke out about what he believed in before it was cool, before it boosted your Twitter numbers or got you followers on Instagram. You know, he did it because it mattered to him, and he was willing to sacrifice his livelihood in the prime of his career. I mean, the guy was arguably the greatest heavyweight he's ever fought, and he gave away a major chunk of what would have been his prime years. I don't know a lot of athletes that are willing to do that. I mean, you know, these days, the athlete most recognized for kind of giving his career away is Colin Kaepernick. And, you know, I guess you could put them, they're not in the same discussion. You could kind of put them in different solar systems, but kind of the same idea that, you know, Colin took a stand several years ago and he's kind of given away a career because of it. But, but Ali did it long before it was the thing to do. And now everybody's kind of coming around saying, well, look at me and look how much I care about these causes and all the rest. You know, this was long before that.
Well, I think what you're saying then there is true. Ali did it before it was cool.
Sure, yeah, he was controversial before controversial was cool, and you know, he's the most remarkable athlete that, you know, I even caught a little glimpse of. I mean, I'm not quite the veteran that Randy is, but I still remember it was not political in any way. But he was I was at a fight card when I was 16 years old in Buffalo, and Tony Tubbs was fighting Greg Page, which was a horrible heavyweight fight. It was a heavyweight title fight. It was 15 rounds. And by the 6th or 7th round, everybody in the building knew it was a terrible fight, and they were booing. And Ali was at ringside, and he would stand up between every round. He'd start shadow boxing, and you had 18,000 people there. Ali, Ali. And he'd start, you know, waving his hand to try to get the crowd fired up, and then he'd bring them down, and he'd shush them all. And then the fighters would fight, and then he'd come back out a minute later. And it was wonderful. And this was 3-4 years after he was done fighting. He still held everybody in the palm of his hand. And just to be in that atmosphere was amazing. It was, you know, he was a remarkable man. And just to even be in the same sport that he was so wonderful at, and to be familiar with some of the things he did is just a gift that I've had.
We could all tell Ali's stories on and on, but I wanted to make sure that we kind of dovetailed into this, because in the summer of COVID-19, while everybody is sitting in the house and not being able to work and not being able to go to sporting events, it has created, again, discussion and all these controversies and wonderful debates that people have back and forth. I can tell you that the one debate that I knew that always lasted, swear to God, radio shows that I did 1,000,000 years ago, if nobody was calling, just ask if Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame after he was caught gambling. Boom! And all of a sudden the phones would light up because everybody would be in there. Everybody wanted to get angry about that one. But here's one to fit what we're talking about today. Muhammad Ali, arguably, some can say the greatest heavyweight that ever lived. Others will say there's a guy named Mike Tyson who's the greatest fighter that ever lived. Gentlemen, before the three of us dig into it, here's some people who know boxing, and here's the question. Take prime Ali and prime Tyson. Who would be the better fighter?
Ooh, that's a tough one to call.
But I think at the peak and at the best, maybe I'd just edge it to Muhammad Ali.
I've got to go for Muhammad Ali, but Matt Tyson at his prime, when he was about 21, he was a very, very dangerous human being. But I would never, ever bet against Muhammad Ali because he was a godfather. Opened a lot of doors for a lot of people. Very, very genuine human being and a very, very special man. So I'll go for Muhammad Ali. And I think if you talk to Mike Tyson, he would say Muhammad Ali as well.
Muhammad Ali, obviously. Look, yeah, come on. Mike Tyson is a good friend of mine. He's one of my heroes as well. But just Muhammad Ali was just something special. No one touching him.
Mike always gave the respect to Ali and stuff like that. But that'll be. I may have Ali knocking. I may have Mike knocking Ali out. If I had to choose,
Ali.
Ali.
They'll box his head off.
He's unreal. War fighter. Tyson, obviously, quality fighter. Ali would have found a way. I hate these questions because how do you answer them? You know what I mean? Ali fought some big guys, big punchers, guys like Foreman, and soaked up a lot of punishment against Foreman. As devastating a puncher as Tyson, maybe not as explosive, but he could punch as hard, certainly. I pick Ali against any heavyweight.
I go with Ali. I believe his movement would cause Tyson problems. Durability, he's injured. Yeah, Ali on points.
I believe in their primes, Mike Tyson would have won. The only reason I think that the people that had beat Muhammad Ali, the people that Ali struggled with, I feel like Tyson was the best at that stuff.
I'm a massive Mike Tyson fan too, but I would go for Muhammad Ali because I know I'm not saying this, but did Mike Tyson fight the George Foremans, the Joe Frazier's, them type of calibers, the Sonny Listons, Ken Norton? He didn't, did he? So I think Muhammad Ali would just be a different breed of fighter.
Hey, chops to the guys at BT Boxing for doing a great job putting that together with all those fighters and all those people involved in boxing. I'll start this out right here. I've seen them both. I mean, of course, I was young when Ali fought. Remember the fights, remember watching them, remember the Frazier fights. Certainly, as I said, I was only 4, so I have to at least think that way. My friends will know different. But then again, I saw Tyson fight. To me, you can't hit what you can't see. And Ali, in his prime, would have danced, would have put on a ballerina performance against Mike Tyson. Tyson never would have gotten close to throw any of those big bombs. And when he did, Ali rope-a-dopes himself in, puts up his gloves, lets him punch himself out, then comes right back, nails him with a couple of great body shots, and eventually wins a fight. No, for me personally, it's not even close. Ali is absolutely, without question, the better fighter between the two. Kamish, I'm going to throw this one to you first as the argument continues.
Wait a minute. Tyson.
There it is. Wait a minute. I'm getting in your face now, Ed.
Everything he throws has thunder on it. He throws everything with bad intentions. But, Ed, I do agree with you. There is absolutely no chance Mike Tyson has against a prime Muhammad Ali. Give me prime Tyson, prime Ali. It is no contest whatsoever. Ali spanks him in every way possible. No contest.
You shocked me there, Kamish. So God, I'm thinking, Randy's got me in this one. All right, Fitz, now to you.
Yeah, I really thought he was going another way too.
See, so do I. He's feigning. That's what he's doing. See, he comes in here. He comes in here.
Yeah,
and
he
puts
came out aggressive there. I was a little worried about it, but yeah, I agree with you guys. I don't think Mike could have handled the prime Ali with all the skills he had. He was a bigger guy, and I've had these arguments. I'd be one of the people who would be glad to wade into those arguments about Mike. Who's the signature win? I mean, he was menacing, unlike any menace that we've seen in the last 50 years. I don't argue that for a minute, but the best guys he ever fought beat him. Who is the signature win? A light heavyweight Michael Spinks, Frank Bruno a couple of times.
That's a great question.
Trevor Berbick. Who's the guy where you look at his roster? Who's the fighter that Lennox Lewis wouldn't have beaten, or Evander Holyfield wouldn't have beaten, or Riddick Bowe in his prime wouldn't have beaten? I don't see where the signature guy is. And everybody makes excuses. Well, you can't count anything that happened after Tokyo. And, but I'm sorry, a champion who is distracted by marital issues or whatever else he had going on, that's what makes champions. Buster Douglas beat his ass 3 weeks after his mom died. Come on, he got up off the floor to do this. That's what champions are supposed to do. But Mike is like, well, he was distracted, so none of the losses count. So, yeah, I'm one of those guys. And I grew up, my teenage years were watching Mike Tyson on HBO. So I was in the middle of it. But I've never seen the smoke that everybody else sees.
All right, Randy. Hey, I tell you, Fitz makes a real good point here about signature wins. Go for it. The signature win.
There's a big difference between the words great and exciting. Ali was actually both, but he was great. Mike Tyson was exciting. That's what he did. And he had some nice wins. He had that 2-minute knockout or so over Michael Spinks, and he flattened a lot of other guys in the first round. But no, he didn't beat Joe Frazier and George Foreman and all those other guys that he beat. Muhammad Ali was one of a kind. He was big. He was fast. He could take it. He had stamina. There was nothing he couldn't. Well, maybe with the exception of he wasn't a big body puncher. But you know what? You're not going to beat Tyson with body punching. You're going to beat him by tying him up, by jabbing him, by frustrating him, by wearing him down. And that's exactly what Ali would have done. It would have been no contest. There's really no discussion.
Oh, come on. There's always a discussion. That's what these debates are for, man. They're easy when you get into these. And besides, if we get a chance to talk about Ali, that makes the whole show better at this point. That's as far as I'm really concerned. So it's easy. Before we leave, let me ask you guys, because I wanted to just talk sports real quick and get this from the two of you, because we've all covered sports for a very long time. We've all been around every sport. I certainly have. Fitz has, Randy with the New York State, and the people that you know as well. COVID-19 has robbed us of a year of sports. And I think it's fair to say that, and I've even been guilty of this, I've said after COVID-19. Someone corrected me recently on the YouTube pages and said, there's never going to be an after COVID-19. And they're right. It's here to stay. It will mutate. It will become a different virus down the road. But it's like the flu. We're probably going to have this with us here for the rest of our lives, and certainly maybe even the next generation. So putting that into context then, Randy, I'll throw this to you first. In your mind, what is sports going to be like when we reemerge? The major sports, not just boxing, but you have to believe that things are going to change irreparably. Baseball, football, basketball, hockey, motorsports, tennis, whatever, is just not going to be the same from a spectator and from a participant standpoint.
Well, I think in the immediate future, and immediate being maybe the next year, we are going to have to be watching it because, again, I don't think there's going to be a second wave because I don't think the first wave is going away. It's going to go up a little bit. It's going to come down a little bit. It's going to stay up, but there's not going to be a second wave. And what we have to do is work as an entire community, a world community, in keeping the masks on, keeping away from each other, and we can't go packing arenas on top of each other because then it will never go away. But I think as long as we fight it like that and stay away and be smart about it, I think that eventually we are going to be able to start getting back together. I don't know that this is going to be here on a major wave like we had back in March and April and May. I think we will see it subside, and I think we will see sports come back. And you know what? If the virus comes roaring back again, then we're going to just have to deal with it. And Ed, all I know is that I know that, and I'm moving away a little bit here, but I know that you're rooting for the Boston Red Sox. Come on over to the Yankees. They're the team for you, buddy.
Randy, it's been very nice of you to join us, and we'll see you again in another 5 or 10 years. Let's get to Fitz now, and let's get an educated opinion instead of this partisan opinion, if you will. Hey, Fitz, you're also a teacher, and that puts you in a double blind with this one here, because teachers are certainly at risk with what's going on, and that's scary indeed. But for sports itself, Randy's got a point. I mean, arenas won't be packed anymore for a long time. People think that all of a sudden there's going to be, hey, here comes the virus killer. Here comes the injection we're all going to get. Here comes the cure. It's not going to happen. By the time it comes out and the vaccine comes out, then you're still going to have millions of people who won't touch it, maybe hundreds of millions. So this still will go on for some time. From a sports aspect, I don't know if we're looking at anything close to a return in maybe 2 years. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of the time frame I had in my head as you were talking, was probably at least 12, 18 months, if not longer. I think eventually there will be a normal we get back to. I think you will see people at football games. You will see fights in 20,000-seat arenas. But I don't think it's anytime soon. I certainly don't think by the end of this year, and maybe this time next year, at least next spring, it's kind of a hit or miss thing. And somebody's going to, at first we didn't think sports were coming back, and then slowly but surely they started trickling them out. Then eventually I think you're going to see things with limited seating and see how that goes. And then we'll kind of, grow on it from there. It'll be a gradual process, but it's not going to be like, okay, well, it's August 6th now. On October 6th, we're going to have 80,000 people in a football stadium. I don't think you're going to see that. It's going to be different for a while before it gets anything close to what it used to be.
Well, I'm hoping that it's only 18 months. There's a part of me that feels it may be even longer than that. When it comes to COVID-19, a reminder, everybody who's listening and watching, stick around, because as we end the show, there's going to be something special here at the end, which we'll talk about what people are doing in the summer of COVID-19. Before we leave, let's make sure we let everybody know where to find everybody, because it's one of those things you can't just tell people, go watch them on Channel 4. You can't do that anymore, because everybody is everywhere these days. First of all, Randy Gordon, if you want to get him on Twitter, it's at @CommishRandyG, which is one of the easiest ways to get him. Also, don't forget that he co-hosts At the Fights with Jerry Cooney on Sirius XM Channel 156. That's Jerry Cooney, who it's not his birthday, in case anybody's wondering. So stop wishing him a happy birthday, because somebody got the damn date wrong. Let's make that point right up here. I'm with you, Jerry. We're trying. So it's Sirius XM Channel 156, Monday and Friday, 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time to catch him there. And also for Randy, you can catch Randy's Ringside. Go to Facebook at randy.c, as in commish, Gordon, and that's where he hosts his show there on Facebook. Now, for Lyle Fitzsimmons, who I'll tell you, and I'll say this out loud again, I said it to him, still the best damn boxing writer in America, and he and I have been doing these shows like Randy. I mean, hell, I've been around you guys now for decades, and it's been a hell of a ride, and that's why Lyle's got to come on, and next time we'll see him, he won't have a beard. Maybe. I don't know. Lyle Fitzsimmons, it's Boxing Scene. You can find him there as well, so you can go to the website for Boxing Scene. That's where you'll find his columns if you want to get a hold of him personally. On Twitter, it's at Fitzbitz, Fitzbiz. And on Instagram, it's Lyle_Fitzsimmons. And oh, yeah, by the way, one more. If you want to catch him on his Facebook, it is at Lyle Fitzsimmons Media. Whew. Okay. I'm going to get somebody to do these voiceovers at the end so that it's a whole lot easier. But, hey, the best in boxing, the best in sports. These guys, I've known them for years. They're great friends. Read them, watch them, be part of it, be there, because it's so much fun. And, of course, Randy G, and I'll be back with Randy G's Ringside right around the Man in the Arena next week. Hey, Fitz, have a great summer, what's left of it, my man. Hey, please be safe and be healthy with the kids there, and I hope everything works out. And maybe next time we'll see your chin again. But really, man, I hope everything is safe and healthy, brother. Thanks so much for joining us.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the kind words, and keep doing what you're doing. You're the best in the business.
Hey, man, I try. I'm only the best because I've got great friends like you, and I've got Randy. Always a pleasure again, my friend. We'll see you again next week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep the damn trees out of your neighborhood, will you? When the hurricanes come by, you're supposed to have your trees all trimmed so that they don't wind up in the pool.
It missed you, but it got us. Thankfully, everybody really is okay. Some crushed cars or whatever, but everybody's okay. Fitz, it was great seeing you. You be healthy, Ed. As always, be healthy, buddy.
As always. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. I really do appreciate it. We'll come back and we'll do a whole lot more here in the future. Hey, thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget, you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter live every time we have a show. You can catch all the episodes on YouTube, and you can find us on all the major audio platforms on podcast. You'll find all that here momentarily as well for those of you watching. But, of course, listening on the podcast, Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like. Be part of everything we are here. And stick around. Hey, in just a couple of seconds, what have people been doing during the summer of COVID-19 when there is no sports? You're about to find out. For Randy, for Lyle, for everybody here, I'm Ed Berliner. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Rock on, true believers. See ya.
With empty courts and bare fields, we can't help but feel a certain emptiness living in a world without sports. But alas, the spirit of competition lives on. A little home foot pong, anyone? How about a handstand challenge? Even here at ABC News, we replaced March Madness and hosted our first annual virtual rock, paper, scissors tournament.
What do you got there, Mike?
I got rock. You got it.
Oh, Taylor wins. Paper covers rock. Taylor, congratulations.
And it didn't take long for some professional athletes to jump on board, taking on new sports virtually. From ESPN.
That'll do it. Mike Conley wins.
To the MLB Network.
Oh, it's so gross! What am I supposed to do?
Even Fox Sports.
That's the whole backstory. Put it out, and the winner is Hamlin.
And athletes are also finding new and creative ways to practice and have some fun at home. And we can't forget all those sports broadcasters. Even though the games have stopped, they're still doing play-by-play.
Michelle on the left is trying to prepare dinner. Wyatt on the right fighting back a yawn, dressed like kind of a half Fred Flintstone. And he wants to watch Blippi, folks. Oh, and he's hit his mom. He has hit his mom. Mom is playing it up. Wyatt is crying.